Dead or Alive 6 promised a fresh start for the series, new mechanics, a modern look, and a push into competitive esports. Fans were excited, but the reality was much more complicated. DOA 6 wasn't just a game with minor missteps, it stumbled in multiple areas, from gameplay changes to online performance, from presentation to marketing, and from developer support to DLC strategies. In this video, we're going to break down exactly what went wrong, why it mattered, how the community reacted, and what Team Ninja could have done differently in every step. Now make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, and let's get after it. Section 1, Gameplay and Mechanics Changes. Dead or Alive has always stood out from other 3D fighters because of its rock, paper, scissors core. The strike, hold, and throw triangle. Timing and reads were everything. You had to understand your opponent's rhythm, bait holds, and punish hard and good reads. On top of that, there was a huge knowledge check. Now, I understand with each new entry to any franchise, you have to add or change mechanics. Otherwise, you're just playing the same game over and over. Street Fighter 4, 5, and 6 are great examples with its drive system. But with DOA 6, Team Ninja decided to take a great system and simplify it instead of expanding on it. They added the break gauge meter that powered up special moves, break blows, break holds, and fatal rushes. On paper, it sounded like a great way to add flash and depth, but in practice, it completely changed the flow of combat. The fatal rush especially, which was a single button combo that looked great but cost nothing in terms of skill. This was the breaking point for many players. It gave newcomers cinematic power without earning it, while veterans felt their mastery was being traded for accessibility, but it accomplished neither accessibility nor complexity. And the new break hold, which was a universal defensive mechanic that could counter any strike type, this further flattened the system. Before, you had to commit to the right hold based on height and direction. Now, one input could save you from almost anything if it was timed right. On top of the new mechanics, stage interactions became repetitive. Where DOA 5 had interesting stage interactions and transitions, DOA 6 had repetitive interactions, depleting the skill of positioning. These changes didn't just tweak balance, they rewired what made DOA feel satisfying. The heart of the series was always its mind game loop, forcing your opponents into stun, predicting their counter hold, then choosing to extend the combo or throw them instead. DOA 6's universal systems disrupted that mechanic. Fights became less about reading the players and more about building meter and mashing out pressure. And because the break gauge started half full every round, momentum snowballed way too fast. Players who landed the first clean hit often controlled the pace of the entire match. What used to be a test of fundamentals and reactions became a game of waiting for meter, and that just didn't feel like Dead or Alive anymore. Longtime fans didn't stay quiet. The competitive community called DOA 6's changes oversimplified and watered down. They weren't against new ideas, but against losing the precision that defined DOA's whole mechanical identity. Many felt Team Ninja was chasing trends, trying to make DOA more like Tekken 7 or Street Fighter 5, instead of leaning into what made it special. Even casual players noticed the disconnect. The game looked like DOA, but it didn't really play like it. What should have been done differently was that Dead or Alive didn't need to reinvent itself. It just needed to evolve what it already had. The break gauge could have worked if it added to the triangle system instead of completely replacing it. Imagine if break blows enhanced certain holds, or a fatal rush enhanced certain moves, rewarding skill rather than bypassing it. Team Ninja had the right idea with evolving their existing system, but they built it in the wrong foundation. Accessibility shouldn't mean simplification. It should mean smarter tutorials, better training tools, and ways to help new players learn the systems, not just skip them altogether. And that's where DOA 6's first crack showed. It wasn't that the game lacked mechanics, it's that it lost its complexity. And once you lose that, it doesn't matter how pretty the combos look. Section 2, netcode and online play. Even if the gameplay changes were divisive, at least people could play each other, right? Well, not always. Online play is the lifeblood of any modern fighting game, but Dead or Alive 6 launched with a host of problems that crippled its multiplayer experience. At launch, Dead or Alive 6's online modes were extremely limited. You only had ranked matches, no lobbies, no private matches, no spectate, no friend invites. You couldn't queue with a friend or watch a set without joining a ranked match yourself. Then there's the netcode itself. DOA 6 ran on delay-based netcode. This is the older method that waits for all players' inputs to sync before showing the results on the screen. And with it, it introduced stutters, teleporting characters, and input lag, even when connection bars looked perfect. And by 2019, rollback netcode had already become the standard for serious fighting games. Games like Street Fighter V and Killer Instinct were showing how much smoother matches could feel with rollback. And matchmaking didn't help either. Sometimes you had to wait minutes without a single match. Other times you get matched with someone on the other side of the world, making the fight feel almost unplayable. In a fighting game, timing is everything. Half a second of lag can completely change a round. This turns perfect reads into misses, counterholds into disasters, and punishes into non-events. For a series that prides itself on fast, precise 3D combat, these issues weren't minor annoyances. They destroyed the online experience. You could have mastered the mechanics offline, but online, every fight felt like a coin flip. So without a robust online play, the community struggled to grow. Friend lobbies and spectator options aren't just conveniences, they're necessary for tournaments and fostering long-term engagement. DOA 6 launched without these foundations, and players noticed immediately. The backlash was loud and consistent. Longtime fans, competitive players, and casual newcomers all complained. Forums and Reddit threads and social media lit up. The competitive scene barely had time to organize before frustration over connectivity and lack of lobbies killed early momentum. And DOA 6's online wasn't just inconvenient, it was actively driving players away. What they should have done is pretty straightforward. Team Ninja should have prioritized rollback netcode from day one. Every modern fighting game that wants a competitive scene needs it. Next was they should have built lobbies, private matches, and spectator tools. Don't make players rely on ranked matches alone. Let friends queue together. Let tournaments happen naturally. And finally, optimize matchmaking. Consider regions, connection quality, and player skill. DOA 6's online ecosystem wasn't just unfinished. It was fundamentally flawed. Proper investment here would have kept players engaged long enough to appreciate the new mechanics and not drive them into frustration. Section 3, developer support and esports push. Even if the gameplay and online had their issues, strong developer support could have salvaged the situation. Unfortunately, Dead or Alive's post-launch story is one of promise cut short. Team Ninja initially positioned DOA 6 as an esport ready fighter. They highlighted online features, leaderboards, and tournament potential, but in reality, support barely lasted a year. After launch, updates were limited to small balance tweaks and seasonal costume packs. There were no major content drops, no consistent competitive patches, and almost no effort to cultivate tournaments. Compare that to Capcom and Street Fighter V, who struggled early, but stuck with the game for years, iterating through multiple seasons and learning from the community and eventually hitting their stride around Season 5. But with Koei Tecmo and Team Ninja, once the first year passed, it was as if DOA 6 was just completely abandoned. There was no long-term roadmap, no ongoing investment in the competitive scene, and no push to repair the fractured player base. Fighting games live and die on community engagement. Without ongoing support, online activity completely dries up. Even if the mechanics were solid, DOA 6 had little chance to grow a sustainable competitive scene. Players who were excited about esports quickly lost interest, and the lack of tournaments, streams, and patches created a vacuum that the game couldn't recover from. And fans noticed this immediately. They hyped the esports, but they didn't run a single major tournament. The updates stopped, there was no patches, and the rank scene completely died, even though that was the only thing that was in queue. And compare this to Street Fighter V, which is the prime example of struggling early, but they stuck with it, whereas Team Ninja gave up only after barely a year. Pros didn't invest time because there was no competitive infrastructure, and casual players didn't stick around because there wasn't anything new to experience. The game's momentum collapsed faster than it ever had a chance to build. What Team Ninja should have done differently is committed to a long-term roadmap. Even modest support over 3 to 5 years could have grown the community steadily rather than losing it after one season. Esports requires infrastructure, which means frequent tournaments, robust online systems, and balanced patches tailored to the competitive scene. Team Ninja could have learned from Street Fighter V journey and the current Street Fighter VI journey outside of their pay-per-view. So even though it had a slow start, it could have had a season-by-season build towards a thriving scene. Instead, DOA 6 never got the second chance because it didn't even give itself one. Without ongoing support, even the best ideas die in a year, and unfortunately that's exactly what happened. Section 4, Monetization, DLC, and microtransaction controversies. Even if a fighting game plays well, the way it handles monetization can make or break its reputation. In DOA 6, Team Ninja and Koei Tecmo stumbled horribly in this department. Now, this section could arguably be the real deal breaker for players, both casual and diehards alike. This was the icing on the cake that may have really destroyed the game. At launch, DOA 6 included a large roster of paid costumes and cosmetic items, many of which were tied to seasonal packs. Some items were locked behind expensive bundles or microtransactions. I mean, even hair color was locked behind a paywall. Even gameplay affecting features like certain online boosts or unlockable items nudged players towards spending extra money. While this approach isn't unusual in modern games, DOA 6's implementation felt extremely aggressive, particularly for a premium price title such as Dead or Alive. Fans felt like they were being nickeled and dimed for content that in previous games would have been included from the start. Costumes that were a part of the iconic DOA identity were now premium, creating frustration in a sense that Team Ninja prioritized monetization over player experience. The timing of microtransactions right after launch, when many players were already skeptical about the gameplay changes, completely amplified negative sentiment. It didn't just feel like optional extras, it felt like the game was asking for money to maintain its identity. And this response was immediate and vocal. Fans expressed aggressive frustration online. Even casual players who might have ignored competitive concerns were put off by what they perceived as an exploitive monetization model. When it comes to microtransactions, DOA 6 could have implemented a fair, more transparent system. Cosmetic DLC is fine, but it should complement the base game, not gate content that fans expect from day one. Examples of better approaches could be like bundling fan favorite costumes with launch editions or early season passes. You can offer cosmetic currency earnable through gameplay, not just purchases, and avoid gameplay affecting items behind paywalls. Now, I'm glad that later they did implement single costume purchases without purchasing the entire bundle, which is what they did in Dead or Alive 5, but that doesn't compensate for the aggressive practices that were implemented early on. With a more player-friendly monetization approach, DOA 6 could have avoided anchoring its core audience while still generating revenue, a balance that's critical for long-time success. Section 5, Story Mode and Single-Player Content. For many players, the single-player experience is a major reason to pick up a fighting game. Story mode, arcade, and extra challenges give casual players something to enjoy while they learn the mechanics or simply experience the world. In DOA 6, this area left a lot to be desired. DOA 5 introduced a story mode with cinematic cutscenes and branching character interactions, and DOA 6 continued that same mark. On the surface, it looked like an upgrade from the previous games, but the execution was very shallow. The story itself was short and loosely connected, often feeling like a string of fight sequences with minimal context. Arcade and survival modes existed but were bare bones, offering little replayability. There were few rewards for completing these modes, but no significant unlocks or incentives that encouraged players to explore them fully. The combination of a shallow narrative and limited solo content left the single player experience feeling underdeveloped, particularly compared to the past entries such as DOA 4, which had more engaging character-driven arcs and meaningful arcade progression. A weak single-player experience impacts both casual and competitive communities. For newcomers, story and arcade modes are the training ground. They help players learn character moves and mechanics in a low-pressure environment. When these modes are shallow, players either stop playing after a few matches or enter multiplayer without a proper understanding of the system. Long-term engagement suffers. It's not just about fun, it's about player retention. The community was very disappointed, especially those who enjoyed DOA for more than just competitive play. They found that there was no depth in the story, arcade and survival modes don't even feel worth playing, and they felt like the single player was just an afterthought. Things that Team Ninja could have done differently is they could have invested more into the story in single player modes without overhauling the fighting system. A few clear improvements are to expand the story mode with more character arcs and meaningful interactions, or my idea of just making cutscenes between each fight fight to expand on the character's story and how they are a part of the whole story. Another thing is offer unique rewards for completing arcade, survival, and challenge modes, such as cosmetics, alternative costumes, or gameplay unlocks. Include tutorials such as mini games or combat challenges that integrate with single player modes to teach the mechanics gradually. A strong single player content strengthens a game's foundation, giving both casuals and competitive players a reason to stay engaged. DOA 6 had the opportunity to do this, it just didn't fully take it or didn't complete it. And finally, section 6, marketing and messaging. Even the best fighting game can falter if its marketing doesn't make sense. And DOA 6's marketing was all over the place. Team Ninja tried to walk a tightrope. They wanted to present DOA 6 as a serious esports fighter while toning down the series' traditional fan service. In a board meeting, I'm sure it sounds reasonable. A modern fighting game that's less sexualized and more competitive, but when you have an entire franchise that has balanced, complex gameplay with sex appeal, that's not going to go over well to fans. You could argue that the game was dead on arrival after the infamous core values presentation. Team Ninja attempted to explain what DOA 6 stood for, but it came across as just awkward and almost self-parroting. At the same time, trailers continued to show more conservative costumes and flashy fatal rushes, sending mixed messages about whether the game was serious or just another flashy fan service heavy fighter. Compare this to Dead or Alive 5, it marketed itself as a competitive, high skill fighting game and embraced its sex appeal, but it never had to explicitly tell either. The visuals and animations and mechanics did all the talking. It had confidence, whereas DOA 6, by contrast, felt like it was trying too hard to convince its players of what it was, when it didn't even know what it was to begin with. Mixed marketing creates confusion. Competitive players wondered if the game was really for them. Casual fans weren't sure whether to expect a fun, flashy experience or an esports simulator. When your messaging is inconsistent, you dilute the game's identity before anyone even touches it. Marketing isn't just about attracting attention, it's about establishing trust and clarity. DOA 6's marketing did the opposite, leaving both audiences frustrated and unsure. And fans noticed this immediately. Even longtime fans felt alienated, whereas DOA 5's confident approach, showing complex mechanics, beautiful characters, and attitude without talking it up, had worked perfectly. And DOA 6, however, seemed uncertain about who it was and who it appealed to. What Team Ninja should have done differently is made their messaging clear. You need to embrace the game's identity fully. If it's a competitive fighter, let the gameplay speak for itself. Don't try to sell it with awkward presentations. Keep fan expected elements consistent and natural. They can coexist with a serious fighter. DOA 5 proved that, and both Street Fighter 6 and Tekken 8 have done an almost perfect job of balancing sexy characters with solid gameplay. And last is use trailers and marketing to show and not tell. Beautiful character designs, solid mechanics, and flashy combos are enough to communicate both fun and depth. DOA 6 didn't need to tell players it was serious. It should have just shown them. Confidence, consistency, and clarity in marketing could have prevented a lot of the confusion that plagued its launch. So to sum it all up, Dead or Alive 6 had the potential to build on a beloved series, but inconsistencies and missteps prevented it from reaching that potential. From gameplay changes that divided fans to online issues, inconsistent marketing, shallow single-player content, aggressive monetization, and a lack of sustained developer support, the game just completely struggled to find its footing. The story of DOA 6 isn't just about what went wrong. It's a cautionary tale about knowing your audience, committing to your vision, and following through with consistent support. For Team Ninja, the lessons are pretty clear. For fans and players, DOA 6 remains an interesting experiment. A fighter with flashes of brilliance, but one that ultimately fell short of its promise. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. Please like and subscribe. Comment down below. I love the engagement that I've been getting on the previous videos. The momentum for Dead or Alive is awesome. It's going to continue going, and I'm going to continue making more videos on this. I have more videos in the bag that I'm going to continue making. So thank you guys so much for the support. Again, please subscribe, and until next time, this is Shred out.